At 6:12 a.m., Gladys Bennett's white Range Rover idled crooked on Pier 47, driver's door flung wide to the slate-blue water of Boston Harbor. Her purse lay on the passenger seat with the zipper open, her phone face down on the rubber mat, the ultrasound photo half crumpled under the brake pedal. By 8:30, a microphone forest grew around her husband, tech billionaire Graham Whitfield, as he told the cameras she'd struggled and left in a moment of distress. "She ran," he said, jaw locked. Detective Marisol Vega watched his pupils instead of his words. The GPS log in evidence bag 14 said otherwise. The morning Gladys vanished, fog curled off the harbor like breath on a cold window. In Beacon Hill, the Whitfield brownstone glowed warm, all polished wood and the polite hush of money. Gladys padded past framed magazine covers of her husband, the visionary, the pivot king, the man who outsmarted the market, and carried decaf coffee to a couch that looked expensive and uncomfortable. She was 32, 7 months pregnant, and carrying weight she'd wanted all her life. She was also carrying a silence, the kind that makes you tiptoe in your own home. "Big day," Graham said, descending the stairs in running shoes and a perfect thermal. He kissed her forehead out of habit, not heat. "Board meeting at 9, the foundation gala tonight. You'll come, right?" "I promised Alison I'd help with her classroom supplies," Gladys said. "I'll meet you at the gala." His face tightened the way it did when he was about to call a compromise. Fine. He wasn't cruel. He was curated. She'd fallen in love with the version of him that fixed broken toasters in their first Cambridge apartment. He'd become the man who had a person for the toaster, a person for the person, and an NDA for them both. "I want you there," Graham said. "Optics matter. We're launching the maternal health initiative." Gladys rubbed the edge of the ultrasound photo like a worry stone. "Optics matter more than how I feel." He didn't answer. A driver texted that the car was ready. He left with the soft buzz of expensive efficiency. Gladys stood in the doorway, fingers on her belly. The baby kicked, a small, insistent drum. She told herself the lie she'd been living for months. When the baby comes, he'll soften. When the baby comes, he'll look up from the horizon and see me. The Range Rover's interior smelled like leather and mint gum. A small blue light near the dash blinked. She'd noticed it last week and had asked a mechanic at a Jiffy Lube. The kid had shrugged. Probably dealer junk. She had errands. She had a meeting of her own. Off the books, off the calendar, off the script. At 6:12 a.m., she turned out of Beacon Hill and headed toward the waterfront, where the fog moved like a curtain. By 7:10, Detective Marisol Vega stood by the abandoned SUV with a pen behind her ear and irritation in her bones. The GPS unit showed the car had traveled from the brownstone to Pier 47 without deviations, cleaner than a nurse's hands before a procedure. Too clean. Vega grew up in Hyde Park with 5 brothers and a mother who could smell a lie through a closed door. She'd learned to watch how people left things, a door ajar, a coffee ring, the angle of a chair. She crouched by the brake pedal, lifted the ultrasound photo with tweezers, and looked up at the grey light. "Something's missing," she said. "What?" the rookie asked. "The mess." By 8:30, reporters gathered outside Whitfield Capital headquarters. Graham, in Navy and Consequence, read a statement. He spoke like a CEO managing a market shock, the crisis contained in vowels. He mentioned mental health, unspecified stress, the hope she had simply needed space. He did not say kidnapping. He did not say danger. His legal counsel stood just over his left shoulder like a shadow that charged by the hour. "Gladys is beloved," he said. "We are asking for privacy." Privacy was gone. In Dorchester, Alison Bennett, 3rd-grade teacher, older sister, keeper of the sentimental, clutched her coffee and stared at the TV. She was 2 years older than Gladys and still held the storied family role of person who says what everyone else is thinking. She didn't run, Alison whispered to an empty kitchen. She dialed Gladys, straight to voicemail. She texted, "Pick up, not playing." She drove to Beacon Hill. At the brownstone, the doorman recognized Alison by her stubborn jaw. Inside, the house smelled like lemon oil and the cold scent of money. Alison found the house manager, a kindly woman who looked constantly on the edge of apology. "We haven't seen her," the woman said. "Mr. Whitfield has the police involved." "He has the narrative involved," Alison muttered. She walked to the nursery Gladys had half finished. A rocking chair, a mobile of paper cranes, a crib still in its box, because Graham insisted on a designer brand whose waitlist worked like a velvet rope for bassinets. Alison ran a finger along the chair's arm and felt a splinter. Small, real, human. She sat, let the chair creak, and cried for precisely 30 seconds. Then she stood up and turned into a weapon with sensible shoes. At the precinct, Vega took Alison's statement. "She said she'd meet me at the gala at 7, Alison said. "She had something to do first. She was vague, but she's been volunteering, quietly, at a shelter in Charlestown. Didn't want the foundation involved. She said, 'Real help doesn't survive a photo op.'" Vega nodded. The shelter, Jackson Street Women's Center, sat in a row of townhouses whose paint peeled like tired skin. Vega and Alison drove over. The director, a woman named Tasha, met them on the stoop with arms folded. "Gladys is good people," Tasha said. "Brought diapers and didn't Instagram them." "When did you last see her?" Vega asked. 2 nights ago. Said she was helping someone this morning. A woman named Celine. Bad situation. Husband's a cop over in Winthrop. She wanted to get out early. Gladys planned to drive her to a safe handoff point. "Where?" Tasha hesitated. "Neutral ground. Those big storage units off Route 1. Eden's Gate. The idea is neither party knows the other's shelter." Vega wrote it down. Her phone buzzed with an email from a tech. "GPS pulls done, see attached," and a text from her captain. "Press once a line. Keep it bland." "You think Gladys ran?" Tasha asked. "I think people run to something," Vega said. "Fear, freedom, a myth about themselves. But they always run to something." Alison squeezed her keys. "She was running to a life she chose," she said. "We're going to find her." Vega nodded, already sliding keys into the ignition. "We are." As they pulled onto Route 1, Alison stared out the window at the strip malls and the car lots, and the giant flag whipping itself ragged in the wind. "He's already writing his statement," she said. "He's always writing statements." Vega tapped the steering wheel in time to a thought. "Let him," she said. "We're going to read the road. Eden's Gate." Storage sprawled like a grid of secrets just past a diner that served corned beef hash with a pride bordering on sin. Rows of units, blue doors, numbers stenciled in white. Security cameras blinked up on poles like distant warning stars. The manager, a man who'd lived his life in Red Sox hats, squinted at their badges and scrolled through footage. There, Gladys's white Range Rover rolled past at 5:49 a.m. Another vehicle, black panel van, no markings, turned in 2 minutes later. There was no footage of Gladys or the pregnant silhouette they wanted. A camera at the far end flickered and died, a coin battery failing in a cold morning. "Power hiccup," the manager said. "Any trouble's always when a battery forgets its job." Vega requested the logs, texts to techs, quietly asked for the security system's maintenance vendor. Meanwhile, Alison studied the screen as if she could scrub time with willpower. "Gladys met someone here," she said. "But we don't see her meet anyone," Vega turned to the man. "Do you keep a physical log of after-hours events? Alarms? Sensor trips?" He handed a clipboard, dusty and old school. At 6:02, a motion sensor recorded activity behind Unit B27. Another note, smudged. Camera 4 offline, 5:59:6:12. B27, Allison said. Who's renting it? Ah, the manager said, tapping keys. Merritt Holdings. Vega looked up sharp. Merritt? Like Sloane Merritt? Allison asked, her mouth already thin. Graham's PR czar? The manager shrugged. I just rent rectangles. Vega called it in. Within an hour, detectives had a warrant. B27 held a folded table, 2 office chairs, a blue moving blanket, a box of disposable gloves, a roll of gaffer tape, and the clean absence of fingerprints that meant someone had wiped their shame. Allison held herself still to keep from shaking. He knew, she said. Graham knew. Vega didn't answer. She was looking at a small scuff on the concrete. Black rubber streaks next to a smear of something faintly reddish-brown. She thought of the word people feared to say, when something still might end well. Blood. She bagged a swab. Outside, wind rattled the blue doors. Somewhere in Boston, a press team ran through talking points. Somewhere else, a woman named Celine waited to be picked up and learned what it felt like to be stood up by safety. Vega's phone buzzed. Tech. Car's GPS log shows false zeros. Someone bathed it. But the onboard module, buried in hardwire, that one forgot to lie. I'm pulling the raw now. She texted back. Bless you in very secular ways. Allison stared at the clouds, sliding like grief across the sky. He's going to say this is rogue staff, she said. He's going to say he didn't know. Maybe he didn't, Vega said. Maybe he did. Either way, the road tells the truth. Graham sat in his office, surrounded by glass and view. Boston lay beneath him like a plate he could eat. Sloane Merritt stood by the window and fed him lines about compassion and responsibility, her voice silk on a razor. You need to stabilize the share price, she said. You look worried, but not undone. You look in control, but not cold. I am worried, Graham said, and I'm not in control. Sloane's smile never touched her eyes. It rarely did. She'd clawed her way from a foster home in Worcester to PR director at 29 and chief of communications by 32, a biography web pages called Self-Made, in a tone that guarded her from ever being soft. Vega wants to speak again, Graham said. If she had anything, she'd be in this office with a warrant, Sloane said. We cooperate, we posture, we keep options open. Don't talk about my wife like she's an option, he said, the temper under glass finally tapping. Don't we this? Sloane looked at him long enough to make the silence hot. You want me to be the villain? She asked softly. I can be that for you. But you hired me to protect this house. Don't shatter a window and blame me for the draft. The phone on his desk flashed. Building security. Detective Vega is here. Graham straightened his cuffs the way a man does when he wants to feel like a man. Let her in. Vega entered in a blazer that had seen more weather than his car collection. She placed a clear bag on the table. Inside, a small black slab with leads. That's your wife's secondary GPS, she said. The one connected to the dash isn't factory. This one is. Hardwired to the car's system. It logs whether or not you want it to. I think you paid for the upgraded package. Graham's eyes flicked to Sloane. She looked pleasantly blank, the smile of an expensive weapon in a velvet case. Where did it go? He asked. Pier 47, yes, Vega said. But before that, a detour. Eden's Gate Storage, Unit B27, rented to Merritt Holdings, your holding company for communications and brand. Cameras went off when the car arrived. A van arrived shortly after and left during the blackout. We're checking nearby traffic cameras. We'll find that van. Graham swallowed a small shame he'd been nursing since December. He'd used a private app on Gladys's phone to track her for 3 weeks after a fight about trust. He'd deleted it, after seeing her go nowhere but the obstetrician, her sisters, a bakery, and a church where she lit a candle and cried. He hadn't told anyone, just as he'd never told the world that his father left when he was 9 with the TV and the dog. Unit B27 is a staging area, Vega said. It was wiped. There was trace blood. We don't know whose. If you know where your PR chief keeps a warehouse of shame, now would be a good time to say it. Sloane folded her arms. We rent staging spaces for crisis response, press kits, lighting. We do video statements. Do you do abductions? Allison asked from the doorway. She'd marched past a secretary with a righteousness that looked like a badge. Do you practice those too? Ms. Bennett, Vega said gently. Wait outside. No, Allison said. Say it to my face, Sloane. Say my sister ran. Sloane's eyes were almost kind. Ms. Bennett, she said, I am truly sorry this is happening, but I don't run warehouses of shame. I keep boxes of microphones. Vega slid photos across the table. The blue moving blanket, the gaffer tape, the scuff on concrete. Sloane's expression flickered, an emotion trying to get out of a locked room. Who else has access? Vega asked. Sloane hesitated. Our security vendor. Name, Black Line Protective, Head of Ops, Evan Carroll, Vega typed. The name came back with a face. Middle-aged, boxer's nose, decorated veteran, now a private contractor who believed in God, guns, and clean resolutions. Graham rubbed his thumb on the edge of the desk. Why would anyone? Because someone gave them a reason, Vega said. Money, loyalty, a belief baked into them like bread. We're going to find the van, Mr. Whitfield. And if it leads to a lake house you forgot you owned, we'll be there. Sloane didn't move. You're insinuating. I'm doing my job, Vega said, and her voice dropped a register. And my job is not optics. A linen blind made the world look like old film. Gladys woke to it, and to the cool burn of something medical pricking her arm. She was on a couch, ankle-taped, head thick. She sat up too quickly, and the room tilted. Easy, someone said. A man with a boxer's nose, hands like careful tools, grey t-shirt, dog tags hidden under cotton. You twisted your ankle. Gladys tried to stand. Pain shot through her like a thrown knife. Who are you? Where am I? A safe place, he said. We're going to keep you calm, get you to sign some papers, clear up a misunderstanding. Then you go home. Where's home? Gladys asked. The one where my husband tells the press I ran, or the one where he says he loves me, but I've become an optic. The man's eyes flicked to a camera lens tucked in a corner. I'm Evan, he said. We're in New Hampshire. There are woods between you and road. Don't hurt yourself trying. Gladys swallowed her rising panic. Her hand went to her belly of its own accord. The baby thumped as if to say that panic was a luxury. You have to let me go, she said, voice steadying, because terror can't help you if it makes you stupid. I'm pregnant. Stress isn't a photo filter. Evan didn't answer. He taped gauze on her arm. He walked to a table where a laptop idled open to a blank document, titled Settlement NDA Confidential. The door opened. Sloane Merritt walked in, wearing a field jacket rich women buy for authenticity. Gladys, Sloane said softly. I'm so glad we found you. Gladys laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Found? You hired a man to find me between a storage unit and a lake. Sloane's expression didn't break. It never did. Gladys saw it then. Sloane believed what she said, even when she rearranged truth like furniture. You've been under strain, Sloane said. You left early this morning. Graham is frantic. The press is a storm. Sign these. We release a statement together. You go home. We stabilize the company that pays for your charity dreams and all those cute little cranes in the nursery. You think I want your money? Gladys said. I want my life. Sloane's eyes sharpened. Your life is tied to ours, Gladys. If Whitfield Capital stumbles, Thousands of people lose their jobs, their health insurance. You want to be the virtue girl? Protect the herd. Protecting the herd by kidnapping a pregnant woman? Gladys asked. Is that on the branding deck? Sloane's jaw worked, a flicker of something like rage tightening her perfect face. You won't sign? I'll sign the truth, Gladys said. But not your version. Evan looked at Sloane. This isn't what I signed up for, he said. Quiet. Sloane turned to him with a calm designed to humiliate. You signed up to follow orders, she said, and to protect this company. Evan's gaze went to Gladys's stomach. He swallowed. I didn't sign up to hurt a kid. No one is hurting anyone, Sloane said. We're averting harm at scale. Gladys felt the baby roll, a live reminder that scale is a word people use when they've forgotten what one life weighs. She leaned forward. Evan, she said. Do you have a daughter? He flinched. 11. What would you tell her to do if someone asked her to sign something when she was scared and trapped? Silence hung like thunder that decided not to hit. Evan pulled a chair to the door, sat with his forearms on his knees, and didn't look at Sloane. Gladys memorized the shape of the key on his belt. There's the version where you break a window and the summer air saves you. There's the version where you bide time and the calendar turns in your favor. Gladys chose the second. She drank water, breathed, and waited for a mistake. It arrived with the weather. The generator hiccuped when clouds muscled into rain. Evan stood to check it. The camera in the corner blinked and died. Gladys stood, her ankle screaming. She lunged, grabbed the key, jammed it at the doorknob like a prayer. The door opened to pine, rain, and the kind of cold that makes you alive. She ran. Where? Graham asked, staring at a map of New England like a man who'd forgotten its names. Vega stood by the screen with a laser pointer and a patience maligned as stubbornness by men who preferred luck. Traffic cam caught the black van near Amesbury, Vega said. Crossed into New Hampshire. 2 likely routes to lakes with properties registered to Black Line Protective's shell companies. We're here. She tapped a blue oval by Lake Harrow. We go now. Graham's hand shook as he grabbed his coat. Allison watched and filed the shake under human. She wanted to hate him with her whole body and found a sliver of something else lodged under her ribs. Pity or recognition. He was a man trying to unmake the man he'd let the money shape. They drove in a convoy of police SUVs. Rain ran on the windshield like transparent snakes. The radio crackled names and positions. Vega briefed them in clipped phrases. 2 suspects. 1 known, 1 unknown. Pregnant victim. De-escalate. No hero moves. Graham pressed his forehead to the glass and saw trees, streams, lines. Everything a long, dark blur. He remembered December, the fight in the kitchen where Gladys said, I feel invisible in rooms you built. And he said something about board cycles, and she said, You don't have to be the man your father was afraid of becoming. And he laughed, a short, cold thing he wanted to pull back, even as it left him. He had tracked her. He had said sorry. He had bought her a rocking chair. He had not changed the pace of his sentences. Vega's phone buzzed. A deputy on a side road. Footprint in mud. Bare. Small. Vega swore under her breath, flicked the siren, turned. Pines rose like steeples. Lake Harrow appeared without warning. Grey water, dark shore, a cabin crouched like a secret. Positions, Vega said, voice now the click of safety off. They flanked. Vega tapped the front door. Police. Inside. Voices. A chair scraped. The door opened. Evan Carrow held his hands out. She ran into the woods, he said. She's hurt. Bring a medic. On your knees, Vega said. Hands behind your head. He complied like he'd been waiting for an order that absolved him. Sloane came into view, hair damp, eyes bright with fury. This is a misunderstanding, she said. I'm counsel to Whitfield Capital. You're someone else's story now, Vega said. Face the wall. Graham stood in the doorway as deputies cuffed Sloane. She turned to him, the wordless accusation louder than sirens. You let me build this for you, and you abandoned me in it. Where is she? Graham asked, and the fury left his voice, leaving it hollow and honest. Where is my wife? Lake Path, Evan said, running. She's strong. Strong, Allison repeated, as if the word could be a rope. She bolted for the path. Gladys ran 10 minutes and years. Rain drilled her scalp. Mud grabbed her shoes until she became barefoot by accident. She fell twice, once on her knees, once hard on her side. She stood again because she had no theology beyond forward. Footsteps behind her, then voices that weren't chasing but calling her name like it mattered. Gladys! She turned, ready to throw checkbook words like shields. She saw Allison first, hair plastered to her face, eyes fierce and wet. Then she saw Graham behind her, unimportant and huge. Gladys, he said, throat raw. I'm so sorry. Words came to her like hail. She ducked them all. Don't! Not here! Vega caught up, breath steady. Life lived in running. She took Gladys's pulse with a hand that didn't shake. You're okay, Vega said. The baby? Gladys nodded. Active, she said, tears finding their way. Can we leave? Can we please just leave that house behind us? They walked out of the pines like a procession. Vega in front, Allison holding Gladys's arm, Graham behind, carrying the past like a box too heavy and too stupid to have ever bought. Hospitals smell like bleach and hope. Gladys lay in a bed near a window that offered a rectangle of rain. A fetal monitor drew lines that made music in a language you didn't need to speak to feel. A doctor came in with the gentle authority of a person who'd stayed up 2 decades of nights. You're dehydrated and bruised, but your labs are okay, she said. Baby's heart rate is strong. We want to keep you for observation. Gladys closed her eyes and let herself, for once, be someone who was cared for. Graham stood at the foot of the bed and did not approach like a man who had learned a new etiquette. I'll leave if you want, he said. Sit, she said, because dignity wasn't the same as cruelty. He sat like a man who knew he wasn't owed a chair. Allison hovered, protective and loud. I'll stay, she said to Gladys. Kick him out if his apology uses the word optics. Graham swallowed. Gladys, he said. I did not know Sloane planned this. I hired her to shield us from the worst parts of the world. I didn't realize she'd become one. She became what you rewarded, Gladys said. It wasn't spit. It was simple. You liked that she won. You didn't ask how. He nodded, a small, honest thing. Yes, Vega entered with a notepad, her presence somehow both gentle and steel. We'll need statements, she said. Evan? Gladys asked. What will happen to him? He cooperated, Vega said. He'll be charged. He's also willing to testify that Sloane planned the deception, that she framed the narrative about you running, that she hired Black Line for containment if you refused to sign a statement she drafted. Gladys felt sick, a dizziness that wasn't medical. She told me I was protecting the herd. Vega's jaw flexed. I've heard every lie a scared person tells themselves, she said. The savior ones are the most dangerous. Gladys gave her statement. She did not embellish. She did not make herself nobler. She described the storage unit, the van, the lake house, Sloane's jacket, the way Evan's thumb shook when he wrapped gauze on her arm. She included how she'd planned to meet Celine, how she'd felt complicit when Celine texted, "Are you here?" And she could not be. Vega listened like it was a profession and a sacrament. After, Gladys turned to Graham. I was going to help someone, she said. Not to be seen, just to be useful. You are more than useful, he said, breaking. You are the point. Then act like it, Allison said. Graham nodded, the second honest thing. Sloane and Evan will face charges, he said. I'll cooperate fully, and I'll resign. From the company? Gladys asked, surprised at the speed of relief that rolled through her. From the story where I'm the man who can fix everything if you just be quiet, he said. From the idea that my power is worth other people's harm. The doctor returned with a nurse and paperwork. Gladys signed forms that were not traps. Allison fluffed a pillow with a competence earned in classrooms and heartbreak. Vega stood at the window, watching rain stub itself out on the glass. On TV that afternoon, Sloane Merritt's arrest made footage loop. Commentators called it a shocking turn. The market did what markets do, flinched, then recalculated. In a smaller corner of the screen, a crawl ran the weather. Rain tapering by evening. Patchy fog overnight. In the ward, Gladys slept for the first real time in months. Morning cracked open to a calm that felt borrowed. The nurse coiled Gladys's IV, removed the tape with care. The baby's heartbeat sounded like small hooves on a field. Graham looked smaller without a suit jacket. More like the boy who taught her to ride a bike on a dead-end street in Cambridge one summer, when money was a future and not a map. They'd met at a diner, in a booth that smelled like syrup, when he was nobody. She'd loved the way his eyes warmed when he listened. Somewhere along the road to Billionaire, he'd outsourced that. "Why did you track me?" she asked. His head dropped. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid you would leave the life I made before I learned how to be in it with you." "And did the app help?" she asked. "Did it make me more yours?" His laugh was ugly and short. "It made me more ashamed." She let the silence sit between them until it cooled. "My favorite version of you," she said at last, "was the man who fixed a toaster with a butter knife and a YouTube video. My least favorite is the man who fixes feelings with NDAs." He smiled despite himself, a flash of the diner boy. "I miss him, too." A volunteer knocked and peeked in. "Ms. Bennett, there's someone named Celine here. Says she won't leave until she sees you, but also that she's happy to leave if you want." Gladys sat up, surprised heat in her chest. "Send her in." Celine entered like a woman expected to be turned away. She was 30, pretty in a way the world punished, with a bruise fading yellow along her jaw. She carried a plastic grocery bag like a shield. Inside, a pack of diapers, a chocolate bar, a paperback romance with a cracked spine. "I wanted to tell you I'm okay," Celine said quickly. "My cousin picked me up. We went to her place in Malden. My husband, he's suspended. Tasha connected me with legal aid. I'm safe." Gladys swallowed a knot. "I'm sorry I didn't make it." "You almost died trying to get there," Celine said, half laughing in disbelief. "Which, isn't necessary next time." They both cried a little and pretended they weren't. Celine handed her the chocolate like a sacrament. "For later," she said. "Also, don't hate me, but I called the TV station to tell them you didn't run. That someone took you." Gladys blinked. "You did?" Celine shrugged, a gesture part apology, part triumph. "You helped me," she said. "I helped you." Graham watched, quiet. He thought of the Foundation Gala, the speeches about maternal health, the jazz quartet hired to make compassion sound rich. He thought of this moment in a hospital room, two women giving each other dignity without a budget. Vega returned with updates. Sloane had lawyered up, but Evan's statement made the cage tight. The DA planned to charge Sloane with conspiracy and unlawful restraint, Evan with kidnapping and accessory. Blackline Protective's contract would be audited into oblivion. The storage unit logs, the camera outage, the GPS core, all of it formed a map that led to a very mortal culprit. Choice. Choice looks glamorous in TED Talks, Vega said. In case files, it's usually a receipt. When she left, Alison sat on the edge of Gladys's bed. "Come stay with me a while," she said. "The baby's room can be my second bedroom. We'll eat cheap cereal and watch reruns where people tell the truth in 22 minutes. Gladys smiled. "Deal." Graham stood. "I'll send your things." "I said stay with me," Alison told Gladys, not looking at him. Then, softer. "You can visit." He nodded, acceding without any legal memo making his surrender look noble. "I'm going to resign," he said. "Hold a press conference. Tell the truth." "You're going to be sued," Alison said. "I deserve some of it." Gladys watched him and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in months. Compassion that wasn't a trap. Redemption wasn't a speech. It was a long, dumb road paved with days where you didn't choose yourself first. "Be better," she said, "even if no one claps." A week later, a podium waited in a room where men usually bragged. Cameras congregated, microphones tilted like hungry mouths. Graham walked out without a tie, that small unarmor intentional. He had not slept enough. He looked like a man who had been introduced to himself at last. "Good afternoon," he said. No legal counsel flanked him. Sloane had been arraigned that morning, her expression carved in a courtroom light that made everyone look more human than they intended. "I hired people who did harm," Graham said. "I made a culture that rewarded winning without asking how we won. I believed the story that if the company thrived, all sins blurred into strategy. That story is a lie. My wife, Gladys Bennett, did not run. She was forced, under the supervision of my company's head of communications and a contractor. She was taken to a secondary location to compel her to sign a statement that never should have been drafted. This is the worst failure of my life, and while I did not order it, I created the weather where it happened. I am resigning effective immediately. I will cooperate fully with the investigation. I will donate my severance to the Jackson Street Women's Center and to legal defense funds for domestic violence survivors. I don't expect applause. I expect accountability." Questions flew. He answered only a few. How much did he know? Less than he should have. Why didn't he say kidnapping in the first hours? Because he had believed an old, comfortable story about women being fragile and leaving. "Will you and your wife reconcile?" a reporter asked, voice curious and hungry. "That is not a question for a podium," he said. "It's a question for a kitchen table." He left to a murmur that wasn't triumph and wasn't hatred. Something quieter. The market slouched and then adjusted around the hole where his name had been the brand. At Alison's apartment in Dorchester, Gladys watched with her feet up on an ottoman and a bowl of cereal balanced on her belly. Celine and Tasha sat on the couch with her like an improbable future. The baby rolled, as if applauding with tiny limbs. On the table lay a stack of community center flyers, a draft of a plan that looked more like purpose than optics. Prenatal classes, taught by nurses on their days off, a ride-share network to get women to appointments, a small grant fund for women who needed to leave now. A key turned in the lock. Alison walked in, carrying a bag of groceries and 3 cheap bouquets. "We're making our own gala," she announced, banging cabinets like cymbals. Gladys smiled, let herself lean back, and for the first time since the harbor fog, felt an oxygen that didn't have to justify itself. Later that night, the doorbell rang. Graham stood on the stoop, holding a lasagna like an apology. "You made that?" Alison asked skeptically. "I assembled it," he said. "The butcher took pity on me." Gladys stepped into the hallway. "We have food," she said. "I know," he said. "I just wanted to show you. I'm learning how to be small. I'll leave it and go." She took the pan, warm through the towel. "Stay for a plate," she said, surprising herself. "Eat at the coffee table and don't talk like a press release." He smiled, not relieved exactly. Gratitude had muscle now. Okay. They ate, They talked about shows that ended badly and recipes that didn't. They didn't mention Sloane. They didn't say redemption. They washed dishes in a sink with water too hot and laughed when the soap made Mount Suds. When Graham left, he looked at Gladys the way people look at the ocean. They know it could be deadly, and they know it could save them, and they step back anyway out of respect. In bed, Gladys put a hand on her stomach. The baby rolled, a moon under skin. She whispered to the dark, to the future, to the long road of days. We get to start over every morning. Gladys didn't go back to the brownstone. She and Alison painted the second bedroom a quiet green and built the crib without a wait list. Graham sold his company shares to fund a trust that couldn't be rebranded. He testified. He learned how to sit in a hard plastic chair in a church basement and listen without fixing. Sloane pled to a reduced charge and gave speeches in a prison classroom about the soft, expensive lies she had believed. Evan wrote letters to his daughter, who answered with drawings of trees that looked like lungs. When Gladys went into labor in April, the room wasn't curated. It was bright and ordinary and holy. She named the baby May. At home, she held May while Alison read out loud from paperbacks Celine brought by. At the window, the city moved, complicated and alive. Gladys felt the weight of one life, and it was enough. If stories like this speak to you, resilience, dignity, justice, second chances, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going. The elevator chimed, a gentle, melodic sound that was grotesquely out of place with the storm brewing inside Ruth Matthews. In her hand, she clutched a small, gift-wrapped box containing a pair of silver baby booties, an impulsive, joyful purchase. At 7 months pregnant, everything felt momentous. She pictured the look on her husband Simon's face, the surprise, the soft smile that reached his tired eyes. He'd been working so hard, closing the Melendez deal. She pushed open the heavy glass door to the executive suite, her heart fluttering. And then, through the sliver of a gap in his office door, she heard it. Not the focused tone of a business call, but a low, intimate laugh. A woman's laugh. A sound that, in a single, horrifying second, would shatter her world into a million irreparable pieces. The 37th floor of the Nolan Industries Tower was Simon's kingdom, a testament to his relentless ambition, sculpted from glass, steel, and sweeping views of the Manhattan skyline. For Ruth, it had always felt like a second home, a place where she was welcomed with deferential smiles. Today, however, an invisible barrier seemed to have sprung up around Simon's corner office. The usual hum of activity in the executive wing was muted, and his assistant's desk was conspicuously empty. A strange, primal instinct coiled in Ruth's belly, tightening its grip around the life she carried. She pushed the thought away. It was foolish. Simon was devoted, a man who kissed her burgeoning stomach each morning before he left and whispered plans for their child's future each night. She took a soft step forward, the plush carpet silencing her approach. The door to his office was ajar, just enough to frame a scene not meant for her eyes. Simon was leaning against his massive mahogany desk, his usual power stance softened. Before him stood Lorena Hobson, a junior analyst from the acquisitions department. Ruth recognized her from the company holiday party, sharp, ambitious, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Lorena wasn't presenting a report. Her hand was resting on Simon's chest, her fingers tracing the line of his tie. Her head was tilted back, and that low, throaty laugh Ruth had heard from the hallway spilled from her lips again. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated intimacy. Simon wasn't pushing her away. His own hand was on her arm, his thumb making slow, possessive circles on her skin. He was smiling down at her, a private, unguarded smile Ruth hadn't seen in months. It was the smile he'd given her on their second date, the one that had promised a world of safety and devotion. Time seemed to warp, stretching and thinning until it snapped. The air in Ruth's lungs turned to ice. The silver box in her hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her fingers went numb, and the gift slipped, hitting the marble floor with a soft, dull thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silent hallway. Both heads in the office whipped toward the sound. Simon froze. It wasn't a gradual stiffening. It was a complete system failure. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, horrified mask. His smile vanished, replaced by the slack-jawed terror of a man whose two carefully separated worlds had just collided with catastrophic force. His hand dropped from Lorena's arm as if it had been burned. Lorena's expression shifted just as quickly, from seductive confidence to wide-eyed panic. She took a clumsy step back, her hands flying up as if to ward off an invisible blow. But all Ruth could see was Simon. His eyes, those brilliant blue eyes that had promised her forever, were now wide with the sheer horror of being caught. In them, she saw not remorse, not love for her, but the raw, selfish fear of a king whose castle was crumbling. She took a single step into the doorway, her gaze sweeping over the scene. The half-empty glass of whiskey on the desk, Lorena's slightly disheveled blouse, the charged, guilty energy that saturated the air. The evidence was irrefutable, a verdict delivered without a trial. Ruth. Simon's voice was a choked whisper, a sound she'd never heard from him before. He took a step towards her, his hand outstretched, a reflexive gesture of appeasement. Ruth flinched back, as if he were carrying a disease. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. A terrifying, preternatural calm washed over her, the kind that precedes an earthquake. She looked from his desperate face to Lorena's terrified one, and then her eyes landed on the fallen gift on the floor. The tiny silver booties, a promise of a shared future, of tiny feet that would patter down their hallways, of a love that was supposed to be pure and unbreakable. Now, the box just sat there, a pathetic, discarded symbol of a lie. She finally looked back at Simon, and the look in her eyes was one he would never forget. It was not the fiery anger he might have expected, or the pleading sorrow he might have known how to handle. It was a look of utter and complete desolation, as if he had reached into her chest and snuffed out the very light of her soul. Without a word, she turned. Her movements were stiff, robotic. She didn't run. She walked, each step deliberate and heavy, out of the executive suite, past the curious glances of the returning employees, and into the gleaming, soulless elevator. As the doors slid shut, sealing her in the mirrored box, she finally met her own reflection. A stranger stared back at her, a pale, hollowed-out woman, with the ghost of a dead future in her eyes. The first sob tore from her throat, then a raw, ragged sound of a life breaking in two. The moment the elevator doors closed, swallowing Ruth from view, the paralysis that had gripped Simon Nolan shattered. It was replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline, the same ruthless, problem-solving instinct that had made him a millionaire by 30. His first thought was not of his wife's heart, but of the integrity of the scene, the optics, the potential for fallout. "Get out!" he snapped, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He didn't even look at Lorena. Lorena Hobson, who had been frozen in a state of mortified terror, flinched at the command. "Simon, I didn't know she was—" "I said, get out!" he repeated, turning on her with such ferocity that she physically recoiled. His face was a mask of cold fury. In that instant, she wasn't his confidant, his escape. She was a piece of evidence, a liability that needed to be scrubbed from the premises. Now, Lorena, the illusion of their connection, the whispered promises of a future, the fantasy that she was more than just a diversion, it all evaporated under the Arctic blast of his command. She saw herself clearly for the first time, a tool, a disposable asset. Humiliation warred with fear on her face. With a choked sob, she grabbed her purse from the chair, straightened her blouse with shaking hands, and fled the office, her heels clicking a panicked retreat on the marble floor. Simon didn't watch her go. He was already in motion, his mind a whirlwind of strategic calculations. He strode to his door and closed it with a firm, definitive click. He snatched the fallen gift box from the floor, his fingers clumsy on the ribbon, and shoved it into his desk drawer, out of sight. Out of mind. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Ruth's contact. What do I say? How do I spin this? His mind raced through a Rolodex of excuses, each one flimsier than the last. She was upset about a work review. She tripped. I was comforting her. The absurdity of it was laughable. He had been caught, red-handed, in the most damning of clichés. He dialed her number. It rang and rang, before clicking over to her voicemail. "Ruth, baby, pick up the phone," he began, his voice strained, attempting a tenderness that felt utterly fraudulent. "Listen, what you saw, it was not what it looked like. It was a complete misunderstanding. Lorena was just... she was emotional. Please, just call me. We need to talk about this." He hung up and immediately sent a text. "Please call me. I love you. It's not what you think." A lie. It was exactly what she thought. He paced his office like a caged animal, the stunning city view now feeling like a mocking panorama of all he stood to lose. This wasn't just about his marriage, it was about his image. Simon Nolan, the family man, the stable, brilliant CEO whose personal life was as impeccable as his company's balance sheet. A messy public divorce, especially with a pregnant wife, could spook investors. It could tarnish the brand he had bled for. His phone buzzed. He snatched it up, his heart leaping with a desperate hope. It wasn't Ruth. It was a text from Luis Melendez, his COO and the closest thing he had to a friend. "Luis, deal is signed. Their board just approved. We own it all. Time to crack the champagne. The Melendez acquisition. The deal he'd been working on for 6 months, the crowning achievement of his year. Any other day, this news would have sent him soaring. Today, it felt like ash in his mouth. He stared at the message, the triumph of it turning sour. He needed to control the narrative. He strode to his desk, took a deep breath, and dialed Luis. "We did it," Simon said, forcing a triumphant tone into his voice. "Tell the team I'm buying a round at the Campbell tonight. Top shelf." "That's the Simon I know." Luis's voice boomed through the phone. "You sound a little off, man. Everything okay? I thought you'd be breaking down the door with this news." Simon ran a hand over his face. The mask of control was slipping. "Just a long day. Listen, Luis, have you seen Ruth? She was supposed to stop by." There was a slight pause on the other end. "Yeah, actually. I saw her leaving the elevator bay about 10 minutes ago. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I tried to say hi, but she walked right past me. Is everything all right at home?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken suspicion. Luis was sharp. He didn't miss much. "Everything's fine," Simon lied, the words tasting like poison. "Just a small disagreement. You know how it is. Hormones." He hated himself for saying it, for using his wife's pregnancy as a shield for his own betrayal. But survival instinct had taken over, drowning out shame, drowning out everything but the desperate need to put out the fire. "Right," Luis said, his tone unconvinced. "Well, I'll let the team know about drinks. You sure you're good?" "I'm the king of the world, Luis," Simon said, the bravado feeling hollow even to his own ears. "I'll see you tonight." He ended the call and slumped into his leather chair, the manufactured confidence draining out of him, leaving a cold, terrifying void. He had sent his mistress away. He had lied to his best friend. He had reduced his pregnant wife's legitimate pain to a hormonal episode. He had done everything to manage the crisis, except for the one thing that mattered: feel a single, honest pang of remorse for the woman whose heart he had just pulverized. Ruth didn't go home. The thought of their perfectly curated Greenwich Village brownstone, a space she had poured her heart into decorating, turning it into a sanctuary for their coming family, was unbearable. Every throw pillow, every framed photo, every lovingly chosen paint color would feel like a silent accusation. The house was no longer a home. It was a stage set for a play whose lead actor had been revealed as a fraud. Her feet, seemingly of their own accord, carried her south. She walked for what felt like hours, a ghost moving through the bustling afternoon crowds of Manhattan. The city's cacophony, the blaring horns, the distant sirens, the chatter of 1,000 lives intersecting, was a dull, distant roar. The only sound she could truly hear was the frantic, panicked thumping of her own heart and the echo of a woman's laughter in a glass office. She found herself in Washington Square Park, sinking onto a cold bench near the fountain. A young couple sat nearby, sharing a pretzel, their heads bent close together, whispering secrets. A father pushed his giggling toddler on a swing. Life, in all its infuriating mundane beauty, was simply continuing all around her, oblivious to the fact that her own had just ended. A sharp cramp seized her abdomen, and she gasped, her hand flying to her belly. The baby kicked, a strong, insistent thump against her palm, as if to say, "I'm still here. What are we going to do?" Tears, hot and blinding, finally came. They weren't the clean, quiet tears of sadness. They were the racking, ugly sobs of absolute betrayal, a physical expulsion of the poison that had just been injected into her soul. She cried for the woman she was an hour ago, so full of naive joy and hope. She cried for the baby who would now be born into a broken world. And she cried for the man she thought she knew, the man who had apparently never existed at all. Her phone had been buzzing in her purse relentlessly. Simon. A dozen missed calls, a string of texts. "Ruth, where are you?" "This is all a misunderstanding. Please let me explain. I'm worried about you." And the baby. That last one sent a fresh wave of rage through her. The baby. He dared to use their child as a pawn in his desperate plea. He hadn't been thinking about the baby when he had another woman's hands on him, when he was smiling that secret, intimate smile. With trembling fingers, she powered the phone off. The silence was a relief, a small act of severing the connection, of reclaiming a tiny sliver of control in a world that had spun completely off its axis. She needed an anchor. She needed someone who existed outside of Simon's orbit. Her fingers, still shaking, dialed her older sister, Chloe, a no-nonsense ER doctor in Chicago who had never been fully convinced of Simon's perfection. Chloe picked up on the second ring. "Ruth, what's wrong? You never call in the middle of a weekday." Ruth opened her mouth, but only a choked sob came out. "Ruthie, talk to me. Are you okay? Is it the baby?" Chloe's voice sharpened with professional concern. "He's having an affair," Ruth finally managed to whisper, the words feeling foreign and vile on her tongue. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Chloe's voice, stripped of all gentleness, returned. "That son of a bitch. Where are you right now? A park. I don't know what to do, Chloe. Okay, listen to me, Chloe said, her tone shifting into the calm, authoritative command she used during medical emergencies. First, you are not going back to that house. Not tonight. Do you have your wallet? Yes. Good. Book a room at a hotel. A nice one. Use the emergency credit card, the one he doesn't see the statements for. Get a suite. Order room service. And then you're going to sit there and breathe. That's all you have to do today. Just breathe. I'm booking the first flight out tomorrow morning. I'll be there by 10. The simple, actionable instructions cut through the fog of Ruth's despair. A plan. A next step. It was all she could handle. Okay, she whispered, the word a fragile lifeline. And Ruth? Yeah. You're not broken, Chloe said, her voice fierce with a protective love that felt like a shield. He is. Remember that. After the call, Ruth felt a subtle shift inside her. The hysterical, wounded part of her was still there, but a new layer was beginning to form over it, thin and brittle but present. It was a layer of cold, hard clarity. The image of Simon's face when she walked in replayed in her mind. The fear in his eyes wasn't for her, or for their marriage. It was the fear of consequence, the fear of a mess. She had been a part of his perfect life story, the beautiful, intelligent wife who provided the perfect backdrop for his meteoric rise. And the baby was the next chapter. It was all part of the Simon Nolan brand. She stood up from the bench, her back aching, her body heavy with the weight of both her child and her grief. She was not just a wronged wife. She was an asset in a portfolio, and he was now in damage control mode to prevent a depreciation. As she walked toward the street to hail a cab, a steely resolve began to replace the shock. He had mistaken her quiet love for weakness, her trust for naivete. He thought this was a problem he could manage, a fire he could extinguish with a few well-chosen lies. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The atmosphere at the Campbell, a lavish bar tucked into Grand Central Terminal, was electric. The senior executive team of Nolan Industries was celebrating, their voices loud and their laughter echoing off the ornate vaulted ceilings. At the center of it all was Simon, playing the part of the conquering hero. He held a glass of Macallan 25, nodding as his team toasted the Melendez acquisition, a deal that would cement his legacy as a titan of the tech industry. He smiled. He shook hands. He accepted congratulations. But behind the facade, his mind was a maelstrom. Every time the bar door opened, his head would snap up, a desperate, foolish part of him hoping to see Ruth walk in, ready to accept his half-baked apology. Every buzz of his phone in his pocket sent a jolt through him. But it was never her. It was just another congratulatory message, another person celebrating a victory that felt utterly hollow. Luis Melendez watched him from across the table, his dark eyes narrowed with concern. He knew Simon better than anyone. He'd been with him since the garage startup days, had seen him at his most brilliant and his most ruthless, and he'd never seen him look so haunted in a moment of triumph. "You're a million miles away," Luis said, sliding into the seat next to him. "Just savoring the win, my friend," Simon deflected, taking a large gulp of scotch. "Bullshit," Luis said bluntly. "I talked to my assistant. She saw Ruth leave the building today. Said she looked like she'd been hit by a bus. Then you blow me off with some lame excuse about hormones. What did you do, Simon?" The question was direct, stripped of deference. It was friend to friend, not COO to CEO. Simon swirled the amber liquid in his glass, avoiding Luis's gaze. "It's complicated." "Complicated how? Is it Lorena Hobson?" Simon's head snapped up, his eyes wide with alarm. "What do you know about Lorena?" Luis let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head in disappointment. "Simon, I'm the COO. I see everything. The late-night expense reports for dinners for two. The business trips, where her travel mysteriously aligns with yours. I'm not blind. I just assumed you were smart enough not to shit where you eat. And I damn well assumed you were smart enough to end it when Ruth got pregnant. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. So I'll ask you again. What did you do? The accusation, so plainly stated, stripped away the last of Simon's bravado. He slumped in his chair, the weight of his transgression finally pressing down on him. She walked in on us, Luis. Ruth walked in and saw us in my office. Luis swore under his breath, a long, sharp hiss. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. Jesus, Simon, of all the stupid, reckless... In your office? What were you thinking? I wasn't, Simon admitted, his voice barely audible over the din of the bar. It just happened. It was a mistake. A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt, Luis retorted, his voice laced with contempt. This was a series of choices, a year-long series of choices. And for what? For an ambitious analyst who looks at you like you're a stepping stone. It wasn't like that, Simon argued weakly. Lorena, she gets it. The pressure, the drive. With Ruth, everything became about nesting, about baby-proofing the world. I just needed an escape. Louis stared at him, his expression hardening. An escape? You have a wife who adores you, who gave up her own promising career in art curation to support yours. A woman who is carrying your child. And you needed an escape? You're not a titan, Simon. You're a coward. You're terrified of the one thing you can't control, the one thing that demands you be a selfless human being instead of a ruthless CEO. And now you've probably destroyed it. The word coward struck a nerve deep inside Simon. He was the man who faced down hostile boards, who crushed competitors, who gambled millions on instinct and won. But Luis was right. Faced with the profound, emotional reality of fatherhood and unconditional love, he had panicked and sought refuge in the transactional, controllable world of a workplace affair. I can fix this, Simon insisted, the words a desperate mantra. I just need to talk to her. I'll buy her a new car, a trip to Paris, whatever she wants. Louis shook his head in disgust. You still don't get it, do you? You think this is a negotiation. You think you can acquire forgiveness like you acquired the Melendez group. Ruth's heart isn't a line item on a balance sheet, you idiot. You can't put a price on trust. He stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. The celebratory noise of the bar seemed to fade around them. Enjoy your victory, Simon. You paid a hell of a price for it. Luis walked away, leaving Simon alone in the crowd, the expensive scotch tasting like acid in his throat. He looked around at his cheering employees, at the empire he had built, and for the first time in his life, Simon Nolan felt utterly, terrifyingly bankrupt. Ruth spent the night in a suite at the Carlyle, a place of quiet, old-world elegance that felt like a different universe from her life. She didn't sleep. She sat in the dark on a silk armchair, watching the city lights twinkle below, feeling a profound and terrifying emptiness. The shock had receded, leaving behind a landscape of raw, throbbing pain. But with the first light of dawn, something else began to rise within her. A cold, clear, unyielding anger. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage she might have expected. It was a quiet, focused fury. The kind that crystallizes under immense pressure. Her sister Chloe arrived at 10, as promised, her face etched with a mixture of rage and concern. She didn't offer platitudes or hugs. She simply took one look at Ruth's pale, set face and said, "Okay." What's the first move? That was all Ruth needed. She spent the morning on the phone, not with friends, but with professionals. The first call was to the top divorce attorney in New York City, a woman known for her merciless, surgical dismantling of wealthy philanderers. The second was to a financial advisor, instructing them to quietly begin the process of untangling her personal assets from Simon's labyrinthine corporate structures. By the time she left the hotel in the late afternoon, she was no longer just a victim. She was a woman with a strategy. She took a cab to the brownstone. Walking through the front door was the hardest thing she'd ever done. The scent of the house, a mix of lemon polish, old books, and the faint, lingering scent of Simon's cologne, was a physical blow. A picture from their wedding day sat on the console table, two smiling strangers from another lifetime. She took the silver frame and laid it face down. She moved through the house with a detached, methodical purpose. In the nursery, she paused. The room was bathed in soft afternoon light, the pale yellow walls she'd chosen radiating a gentle warmth. The crib was assembled, a mobile of hand-stitched felt animals hanging above it. A wave of grief so powerful it buckled her knees washed over her, and she had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. This was the heart of the future he had stolen. After a long moment, she straightened up, her jaw tight, and closed the door. She would deal with this later. She was in their bedroom, packing a suitcase with her essentials, when she heard his key in the lock. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain calm, folding a sweater with steady hands. Simon entered the room hesitantly, his face a mess of exhaustion, fear, and a desperate, manufactured hope. He was holding a massive bouquet of white roses, Ruth's favorite. "Ruth," he breathed, his voice thick with relief. "Thank God. I've been calling you. I was so worried." He stopped short when he saw the open suitcase on the bed. The roses in his hand suddenly looked foolish, a pathetic, inadequate gesture. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice cracking. Ruth didn't look at him. She continued to pack. "What does it look like I'm doing, Simon?" "Don't do this," he pleaded, stepping closer. "We can talk this through. Let me explain." "Explain what?" she finally said, turning to face him. Her voice was devoid of emotion, as flat and cold as a sheet of ice. "Should you explain the logistics of sleeping with your subordinate? Or perhaps you could explain the precise moment you decided our marriage vows were optional. Or maybe, and this is my favorite, you can explain how you looked me in the eye this morning, kissed our child through my stomach, and then went to work to be with her." Each question was a perfectly aimed dart, and Simon flinched with everyone. It wasn't like that. It meant nothing, Ruth. It was a mistake. It stopped being a mistake and started being a pattern a long time ago, didn't it? She asked, her gaze unwavering. She saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes and knew she was right. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a lifestyle. "I love you," he said, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. "You and the baby are my world." At that, Ruth let out a short, bitter laugh. "My world was in that office yesterday, and you incinerated it. You don't get to use our baby as your shield or your bargaining chip. This," she said, gesturing between the two of them, "is over." He stared at her, finally understanding. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict. "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice small. "Chloe's flying in. I'll stay with her for a while. After that, it's none of your concern," she said, zipping the suitcase closed with a sharp, final sound. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours on Monday morning." The word lawyer landed like a grenade in the quiet room. Simon's face went pale. This was real. The neat, controlled compartments of his life were not just leaking. They were hemorrhaging. Ruth picked up her suitcase and walked towards the door. He moved to block her path, his hands raised in a gesture of supplication. "Ruth, please, don't. Think about our child." She stopped and looked at him, her eyes filled with a pity that was somehow more damning than hatred. "Oh, I am, Simon," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I am thinking about nothing but my child, and my child will not be raised in a house built on lies. My child will be raised by a mother who taught them the meaning of integrity and self-respect." She stepped around him, her shoulder brushing his, and walked out of the bedroom, out of the house, and out of the life they had built together, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage. For Simon, the 2 days following Ruth's departure were a disorienting blend of panic and denial. He functioned on autopilot, attending meetings, making calls, and projecting an aura of unshakable control to the outside world. But inside his glass office, the silence was deafening. He'd stare at the chair where Lorena had sat, then at the door through which Ruth had appeared, the scene replaying in his mind like a horror film. He had tried everything. He'd left a dozen more voicemails, each more desperate than the last. He'd sent a courier to Chloe's apartment with a handwritten letter, which was promptly returned, unopened. He'd even called Ruth's mother, only to be met with a glacial fury that made him hang up in shame. The Nolan charm, the persuasive power that swayed boards and investors, was useless here. He was locked out. His frustration, unable to find purchase on Ruth, began to curdle into resentment, and he aimed it at the only other person involved, Lorena Hobson. He saw her as the catalyst, the careless spark that had ignited the inferno. It was irrational, he knew, but it was easier than confronting the abyss of his own culpability. He summoned her to his office on Friday afternoon. Lorena entered cautiously, her face pale and drawn. The confident, ambitious analyst was gone, replaced by a young woman who looked haunted. She hadn't slept in 2 days, replaying her own role in the disaster. She had allowed herself to believe Simon's vague promises, interpreting his attention as a sign of a genuine future, not a temporary escape. Ruth's appearance had shattered her delusions as thoroughly as it had shattered Ruth's marriage. "Sit down, Lorena," Simon said, his tone clipped and impersonal. He didn't rise from his desk. He was CEO Nolan, not Simon the lover. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands clenched in her lap. "Simon, I am so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," he cut her off coldly. "This situation is untenable. Your presence in this company is now a complication I cannot afford." Lorena stared at him, bewildered. What are you saying?" "I'm saying your time at Nolan Industries has come to an end," he stated flatly. He pushed a folder across the desk. "This is a severance agreement. It's generous. 6 months' salary. In return, you will sign a non-disclosure agreement of the strictest possible terms. You will not speak of this, or of me, to anyone. Ever." The sheer, brutal transactional nature of the dismissal struck Lorena with the force of a physical slap. He was firing her, erasing her, paying her for her silence. There was no concern for her career, her reputation, or her feelings. She was simply a problem to be disposed of. "You're firing me," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "After everything? You told me. You said you were unhappy. You said you saw a future for us." Simon leaned back, his expression hardening into one of pure, contemptuous dismissal. "You are an analyst, Lorena. You should have analyzed the situation more accurately. You were a diversion, not a destination. Did you honestly believe I would leave my pregnant wife for you?" The cruelty of the words was breathtaking. It was a deliberate, calculated strike, designed to wound and silence her. And it worked. The last vestiges of her affection for him curdled into a bitter, burning shame. She had been a fool a pawn in his selfish game. "You're a monster," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and rage. "I'm a pragmatist," he corrected. "Sign the papers, Lorena. It's the best deal you're going to get." She looked from his merciless face to the folder on the desk. Every instinct screamed at her to tear it up, to scream, to expose him for the hypocrite he was. But then what? She'd be blacklisted in the industry, the woman who had an affair with a powerful CEO and tried to cause a scandal. He would crush her. This was the power imbalance made manifest. He held all the cards. With a hand that shook so badly she could barely hold the pen, she signed the documents. She pushed the folder back across the desk and stood up, her dignity in tatters. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Your wife, she seemed like a good person. I hope she takes you for every single penny you have." She walked out of his office for the last time, leaving Simon with his checkbook and his NDAs. He had successfully neutralized one threat. He had cauterized a wound. But as he sat there in the sterile silence, he didn't feel powerful. He felt hollowed out. He had treated Lorena with the same ruthless disposability he applied to underperforming assets, and the act left a foul taste in his mouth. He was so focused on managing the consequences, on silencing the players, that he failed to see the real nature of his problem. His issue wasn't Lorena. It wasn't even Ruth's anger. It was the man staring back at him in the reflective surface of his darkened computer screen, a man who broke everything he touched and then tried to pay for the damages, never understanding that the most valuable things had no price tag at all. Monday morning arrived like a death knell. At precisely 9:01 a.m., an email landed in the inbox of Simon's personal attorney. It was from Eleanor Vance, a name that sent a chill down the spine of every high-powered man in New York. She was Ruth's legal counsel, and her opening salvo was not a request for a meeting, but a formal petition for divorce, citing adultery, accompanied by a motion to freeze a significant portion of Simon's personal assets pending discovery. Simon stared at the forwarded email, his blood running cold. This wasn't a quiet, dignified separation. This was a declaration of total war. Eleanor Vance didn't negotiate. She eviscerated. The days that followed were a blur of humiliating procedures. He was forced to produce financial records, travel itineraries, and credit card statements. His life was being laid bare, not for his wife in a tearful conversation, but for a team of ruthless lawyers who picked through the details of his betrayal with forensic detachment. The affair with Lorena wasn't a secret shame anymore. It was Exhibit A. The news broke on page 6 a week later. Tech mogul Simon Nolan's marriage implodes amid cheating scandal. A source close to the couple had leaked the story. The article painted a damning picture. The brilliant, self-made billionaire caught with a junior employee while his beautiful pregnant wife planned their nursery. The power imbalance was highlighted, casting him not as a straying husband, but as a predator. The fallout at Nolan Industries was immediate. The board called an emergency meeting. Their faces, usually so full of deference, were now masks of stern disapproval. The company's stock dipped 8%. The Melendez acquisition, his crowning glory, was now overshadowed by a sleazy scandal. He was a liability. "Your personal life is becoming a material risk to this company's reputation, Simon," the chairman told him, his voice grim. "You need to get this under control." Quietly and quickly, but there was nothing quiet or quick about it. Ruth, guided by her lawyer, refused all direct contact. All communication was filtered through legal channels. She was no longer the soft, forgiving woman he knew. She was an implacable adversary, a force of nature he had foolishly unleashed. The stress began to take its toll. Simon stopped sleeping. He lost weight. He'd walk through his empty, silent brownstone, the silence amplifying his loneliness. The nursery door remained closed, a silent monument to his failure. One night, in a fit of despair, he opened it. The sight of the empty crib, the little stack of baby clothes Ruth had folded on the changing table, finally broke through his layers of arrogance and denial. He sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of a future he had murdered, and wept. Not for his stock price or his reputation, but for the loss of it all. The warmth of Ruth's hand in his, the sound of her laughter, the feel of his unborn child kicking. He finally understood what Louise had tried to tell him. He had traded something priceless for something worthless. Meanwhile, Ruth was finding her footing. She and Chloe had rented a quiet, sunlit apartment on the Upper West Side, far from the memories of her old life. She focused on two things with singular intensity: her health and the baby. She practiced prenatal yoga. She took long walks in Riverside Park. She met with a therapist who helped her navigate the treacherous currents of her grief and rage. She was slowly transforming. The ordeal was stripping away the softer, more pliant parts of her, revealing a core of steel she never knew she possessed. She learned about financial statements and legal strategy. She was no longer just Simon Nolan's wife. She was Ruth Matthews, a woman fighting for her and her child's future. One afternoon, a courier delivered a small, plain box to her apartment. Inside was an unsigned note and a USB drive. The note contained a single sentence: "He deserves to lose. You deserve to win." Puzzled, she inserted the drive into a laptop. It contained copies of Simon's hidden expense reports, offshore account details, and damning email exchanges, not just with Lorena, but with others. It was a complete roadmap of his financial and personal deceptions, far more detailed than anything her lawyers had yet uncovered. There was no indication of who sent it. But Ruth had a suspicion. It was a pawn's final move, a quiet act of solidarity from another woman he had broken and discarded. She handed it all over to Eleanor Vance. The war had just become a slaughter. 3 months passed. The divorce proceedings were brutal and swift. Armed with the anonymous information, Ruth's legal team had Simon backed into a corner. He had two choices: a protracted, public court battle that would drag his name, his company, and his indiscretions through the mud for years, or a quiet, massive settlement. Guided by a weary Louise, who had stepped in as a mediator, Simon chose the latter. He signed the papers in his lawyer's sterile conference room. The settlement was staggering. He lost the brownstone, a significant portion of his personal fortune, and a chunk of his company stock, which would be placed in a trust for his child. The signature on the page felt like signing his own obituary. He had lost the war, but with the loss came a strange, unexpected sense of peace. The fight was over. There were no more lies to tell, no more narratives to control. There was only the stark, ugly truth of what he had done, and the consequences he now had to live with. He started seeing a therapist, something the old Simon would have scoffed at. He began the painful work of excavating the roots of his behavior, his insecurity, his crippling fear of losing control, his transactional view of human relationships. He learned to sit with his shame instead of running from it. He sold his flashy sports car and started taking the subway. He downsized from his penthouse to a modest apartment. He poured his energy back into his company, not with the arrogant swagger of before, but with a newfound humility. He listened more than he talked. His employees noticed the change. The tyrant was gone, replaced by a leader who seemed more human, more fallible. He knew he had no right to ask for Ruth's forgiveness, but he had to try to earn the right to be a father. A week before her due date, he sent a single, simple email to her personal address, which he hoped she still used. "Ruth, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, What I did is unforgivable, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand the damage I caused. I don't expect you to ever forgive me. But our child is coming into this world, and that child deserves a father. If you will let me, I want to be that man. Not the man I was, but a better one. I will accept any conditions, any boundaries you set. I just want a chance to be present in our child's life. If you say no, I will understand, and I will disappear. The choice is yours. Whatever you decide, I hope you have a safe and healthy delivery. Simon. He sent it and felt a profound terror. He had finally relinquished control. Ruth read the email in her quiet apartment, her swollen belly a constant reminder of the life about to begin. Her initial instinct was to delete it, to shield her child from this man completely. But as she reread his words, she saw something that had been absent from all his previous desperate attempts, the absence of excuses, the absence of demands. There was only accountability and a humble request. 2 days later, she went into labor. It was a long and difficult delivery, with Chloe by her side. In the early hours of the morning, a baby girl, Amelia, was born, healthy and crying with a lung power that startled the entire maternity ward. The next day, as Ruth held her daughter, a nurse knocked softly on the door. "There's a Simon Nolan here to see you. Should I send him in?" Ruth's heart pounded. She looked down at the tiny, perfect face of her daughter, a being of pure innocence who deserved all the love in the world. She took a deep breath and made a decision. "Yes," she said, "send him in." Simon entered the room, looking nervous and smaller than she remembered. He was holding a single, small teddy bear. His eyes fell on the baby in Ruth's arms, and they filled with a raw, unguarded awe that was completely genuine. He didn't approach. He stood by the door, waiting for permission. "You can come closer, Simon," Ruth said, her voice quiet but steady. He walked to the bedside and looked down at his daughter. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. "She's perfect. Her name is Amelia," Ruth said. He looked at Ruth then, his eyes full of a sorrow so deep it seemed endless. "Thank you, Ruth, for this. It's more than I deserve." "This isn't for you, Simon," she replied, her voice gentle but firm, drawing the boundary he had offered to respect. "It's for her. You can be her father. But we are not a family. We will be partners in raising her, and that is all. There is no going back for us." He nodded, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he accepted it. "I understand. I will spend my life earning her love and your respect as a co-parent." Ruth looked from the broken man who was her ex-husband to the new life in her arms. It wasn't the future she had dreamed of, but it was a future nonetheless. A different kind of family, forged not from a perfect love story, but from the ashes of a devastating betrayal and the slow, arduous, and uncertain path to redemption. What a journey! From the height of a glass tower to the quiet humility of a hospital room, we've seen a world shatter and be rebuilt in a completely new way. Ruth's story is a powerful reminder that out of the deepest betrayal can rise an unbreakable strength. She didn't just survive. She found her power, her voice, and a new future for herself and her daughter. And Simon's path shows us that true redemption isn't about winning back what you lost, but about becoming worthy of what you hope to earn. It's a messy, complicated, and deeply human story about the consequences of our choices and the courage it takes to build a new life from the wreckage. What would you have done in Ruth's position? Do you believe someone like Simon can truly change for the better? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a powerful drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories that feel just like real life.